Welcome back everybody. In this video, we're finally going to take a look at preference bundles and how we can add one to our tweak. Now for those of you who don't know, a preference bundle is just a page inside of the stock settings app where users can go to configure their installed tweaks. Here's a look at the floating dock tweaks preference bundle. As you can see, there's a lot of settings for users to configure, and there's also some custom controls like the dock color picker at the bottom. Preference bundles are also a great place to plug your social media, include GitHub links, or even do things like respring the device. But before we start adding a preference bundle, let's take a look at the file structure of a tweak. You've got your tweak code, a make file, a control file, and a plist file at the start of your tweak. But that's not all that can go inside of your tweak. You can also have sub-projects that go in their own folders, and that's exactly where our preference bundle will go. Think of it as a project within your project. So within this preference bundle, we have a few more things. We have another make file, we have a root list view controller.h and a .m, and we also have an entry.plist file, but we've also got a folder called resources, and that holds a root.plist and an info.plist. The custom view controllers are for functionality and can do things like respond to a button being pressed. The root.plist is responsible for the layout of your settings page, and the info.plist is responsible for the metadata of your preference bundle. We typically won't need to change anything in the info.plist, but the root.plist is where we're going to start. The root.plist is responsible for the layout of your preferences page, so you'll probably spend most of your time in this file. Let's take a look at what the default root.plist looks like. This is Apple's plist file format. If you've done any HTML, this syntax may look familiar, but it's actually XML to be exact, and it's really nothing fancy. I think this format is a bit cluttered, so I've decided to put a JSON translation on the other side to hopefully make it easier to transition to XML. So starting from the top, you can see that this is one large dictionary, and it has two elements inside of it. The first one is items, and items holds an array of dictionaries. I know this got confusing really fast, but it's really simple if you look at the JSON side. Now inside of that array, there's a dictionary, and that dictionary has two values. It has cell and label. Now cell is the type of cell that's going to be used inside of the preference page. The PS group cell is a cell that groups multiple cells together, as you could probably tell by the name. And the label is what the title of that cell will be, so you can see the label in the preferences page. Now for us it's going to say test preferences first page, however you can change it to whatever you want. And that's the end of the first dictionary. Next we have a second cell that's also represented by a dictionary. The first key is cell, and the string for that is going to be PS switch cell. PS switch cell is basically a cell with a switch inside of it that you can turn on or off. There's more properties available for this type of cell, and you can see that on the next line there's a default value, and the default value in our case is true. That means when the user first installs our tweak, this setting will be enabled. Now you could also set this to false, and it would be disabled by default. The next element in this dictionary is defaults. Now this is a little bit confusing because this is defaults with an S, and you can see that the value for it is com.example.testPreferences. This is just a unique identifier for your settings, so that multiple tweaks don't share the same settings. Now you should probably use the same defaults identifier for all of your settings, but that's not to say that you have to. The next property for this cell has the key of key, and that's why I think the XML version is a little bit harder to read. Now the key is basically just an identifier for a specific setting, and that key can be whatever you want it to be. By default it says awesome switch 1, but it could say something like tweak is enabled or something else. And the last property is the label, and this again is going to show up on the screen. So whenever you have the switch on the right, it'll have a label on the left that says awesome switch 1. Now that's the end of the items dictionary and array. Let's move to the next element inside of the root.plist dictionary. This one is simple. It has the key of title and the string of test preferences. This is just what shows up as the title of the navigation bar. We'll take a look at it later. But remember, you'll never see the JSON out in the wild, so get used to the XML. Now this is great and all, but what does this look like inside of iOS? Well, it looks like this. It's a lot of markup for something so simple, but it looks great and it's actually easy to do. You can see how the PS switch cell highlighted on the left matches the dictionary highlighted on the right. Now let's take a look at a more complex preference bundle and how we can use the settings inside of the preference bundle to affect our tweak. Alright, so just like we normally do, I'm going to create the tweak first, and I'm going to call it preference demo. Alright, we'll leave these as default, and now we need to cd into that directory, and here's where we create the preference bundle. So in order for the preference bundle to be linked to our tweak, we need to be inside of our tweak folder and then run the nic.pl script again. Now Theos has made this super easy to do. All you need to do is press 9, give it a new name. I'm going to call mine preference demo preferences, which is a terrible name, but we'll go with it. And then fill in this other information. And next it's going to ask for a class name prefix. Now this is just 3 letters that differentiate your classes from other people's classes, as well as Apple's classes in case they share a name. So I'm going to prefix my classes with PDP, and that's it. Now we have a preference bundle linked to our tweak. So if we open this directory inside of Visual Studio Code, we'll be able to see all of our tweak files as well as our new preference bundle. And in here, we have a ton of new files. We'll take a look at them in a second. But first, let's open the make file that's part of our preference demo tweak. Now there are 2 new lines at the bottom of this. One that adds the preference bundle as a subproject, and another that adds the aggregate.mk makefile. We don't have to worry about this, but it's good to know that they are there. Next, let's take a look at the entry.plist file. The entry.plist file isn't used very often, but it is important. It's the file that preference loader uses whenever it's loading your preference bundle. So right here, all of these that you're seeing are loaded by preference loader, and the things that you are seeing are controlled by the entry.plist file. So you can see the icon, for example, that's being controlled by the icon property, and the label, which is the text that's up there, is being controlled by the label property. So there's some other stuff up here too, like the bundle. This is a behind the scenes type of thing. You don't have to worry about it. There's a cell type. In our case, it's a PS link cell, and all of these cells are actually PS link cells as well. You can tell because they link to a new page like this, and the detail is the page that it actually links to. So this is a class that has been created for us. We'll modify it in a second, but this is the page that the PS link cell links to. Like I said, the icons here, you can change the icon name. We'll add an icon later. There's also an isController property. I'm not too sure what that is, but I encourage you to look it up. And like I said, the label, that just shows what is there. I'm going to change this to preference demo, just so we can really see the preference bundle. And next, we're going to hop into this root.plist. The root.plist is where your layout happens. So inside of this items array, you have a bunch of cells as dictionaries, and these cells will show up like this. So all of these are cells. All of these that you're seeing, they are individual cells. So we want to create our own cells. So let's add them to the bottom down here. So first we create a new dictionary and make sure that you are inside of this array. If you're not inside of the array, it won't pick up on these new cells. We'll add a cell type, and we'll pass in PS button cell. We'll start off with a button. Now if you want to see all of the available cells that you can use by default, you actually just pop to the iPhone Dev Wiki and check out their preferences specifier plist page. This page will tell you what cell types are available by default and everything about them. So if I want to add a PS button cell, I just click on it, and it takes me down to a table with a bunch of properties that I can use on the PS button cell. But these aren't all of the properties that I can add to a button cell. I can also add the general keys up here. So you can see that the button cell doesn't have like a label or a title or anything that you can set the text for. But the general keys up here have a label, and that's available to all of the cells. So to change the text of our button, we'll use the label property. So let's pop back and do that. Let's add a key called label and pass in a string. It'll say open on GitHub. So like I said before, your preference bundle is a great place to put links that you wouldn't normally see inside of your tweak. Some people will add GitHub links, some people will add social media plugs. Another thing is you can add donation buttons inside of there. So if you want to link your PayPal and have users donate what they want, you can also do that very easily. But ours is just going to open the project on GitHub. So now we have a button cell that says open on GitHub, but it doesn't actually do anything. And that's where the action property comes in. So if I add a new action property and pass in a method name as a string, I'm going to call mine open GitHub. It will then look inside of the PDP rootlist controller.m for a method called open GitHub, and it will run that action. So I can go ahead and do that right now actually. We'll go into the .m file and create a void method called open GitHub. And this is just going to open a URL. We'll do http github.com/zaneh/preference dim. This isn't even going to exist. I'll do /theos. We'll take it to the Theos page. And then we need an options dictionary. We'll leave as blank, and a completion handler, which we'll leave as nil. So whenever you tap on the button, it will run this method, and this just opens the URL here. It's kind of a lot of code to open a URL, but it's mostly empty. All right, so let's go back to the root.plist, and let's just keep chugging along. The next thing we want to add is a group cell, and a group cell groups multiple cells together so that you can kind of have sections inside of your preference bundle. So if you look at Better Power Down by Coolstar, you can see that there are 3 unique sections that are broken up into group cells. So let's add some of that to ours. To do it, we just do another dictionary, and the cell type for this one is PS group cell. Now again, we can use label because that's a general key that all cells can use. So we'll add a label that says settings. And then every cell that you want to put in this group comes after the dictionary. And if you want to create a new group, you can just do it like you did the first one. So you don't put cells inside of the group cell in the root.plist, you just put them after the cell. So we're going to add another cell. This is going to be the last cell we're going to add. And this cell type is going to be PS switch cell. We're going to add a label, and it's just going to say enabled. So if this switch cell is on, our tweak is enabled. If it's off, our tweak is disabled. We'll need to make that function later, but for now we just have a switch that looks like it's doing something. Alright, so let's make package install, and let's see what happens. So before the tweak could finish compiling, there was an error, and it says LD framework not found preferences. Now this is because the preferences framework doesn't exist inside of our SDK. We need to fix that. I'm not sure if this happens to everybody, but I imagine if you didn't patch the SDK like you were supposed to, you have the same issue as me. But luckily it's not too hard to fix. If we just go to github.com/theos/SDKs, we can see that there are 3 versions of iOS to choose from. Choose the one you're closest to, and then go into Library, Private Frameworks, and then find the preferences.framework folder. Alright, so there it is. And then there's one file inside of it that's preferences.tbd. If we click on it and then click the raw button over here, we can save this file to our computer. But first we need to set up a folder for it to go into. So the folder is actually right here, /applications, Xcode, contents, developer, platforms, iPhone OS, and then inside of there, you need to go into the developer folder, SDKs, whichever one you want, system, library, private frameworks, and inside of this folder, we create preferences.framework. Then we can save this file to the preferences.framework folder that we just created, and now it should compile. Now if you want, you can patch all of your private frameworks at once by cloning this repository and replacing your SDK right here with the one listed here. I only need the preferences.framework for this video, so I'm just going to use the preferences.framework one, but I would recommend you come over here and patch your entire SDK if you're working with a bunch of different frameworks. Alright, so enough of that. It should work now if I run make package install. Alright, so my tweak and my preference bundle compiled just fine, and you can see that we have a new section here called preference demo. And if we tap on that, that's our preference bundle. It has exactly what we expect. If we go back to Visual Studio Code, we can see a PS group cell at the top that says preference demo preferences first page. It's kind of a long one there. And then we have 2 cells grouped into it. We have a PS switch cell called awesome switch, and we have a button that says open on GitHub. And then we have another group down here called settings, and it has a switch that says enabled. Alright, so just for fun, let's see if the GitHub link works. We tap it, it opens Safari and brings us to github.com/theos. Great. But our switch doesn't work. The one that says enabled, if we tap it and turn it on, now our tweak should be enabled. But if we go back a page and open it again, it disabled itself. And that's because it doesn't have persistent storage. Awesome Switch up here does have persistent storage. If we go back and open it again, you can see that it's still off. So this remembers, but our enabled switch doesn't remember. And that's because the Awesome Switch 1 has a defaults defined, and we don't have a defaults defined. So let's add one. We just add a new key, and we'll call it defaults. And then we pass a string, and we give it defaults to work with. So this is an identifier that's unique to your bundle that tells preference bundle where the settings are stored. So in our case, I'm going to use com.zanehilton.preference demo preferences again. And then we can also add a key, and that key is going to store the specific setting for if it's enabled or not. So we can just do string is enabled, and boom. Now we have a switch that should work, and if we ever need to retrieve the value of the switch, the key for that is going to be is enabled. Great, so now if I were to make package install, this would work the same way that Awesome Switch 1 does. But now we need to add some actual functionality to this switch, because if we turn it on and turn it off, it actually doesn't do anything at all. It just looks like we're doing something. So now we need to retrieve the value of the switch from the preference bundle. There are a ton of ways to do this, and it's changed over the years, So if you're watching this video in 2025, it's probably not going to work the same way. But if you're watching this anytime in 2018, you should be able to follow along without a problem. So in my tweak.xm file, I'm going to create a dummy tweak that'll basically just show me the value of my preferences. So to do that, I'm going to display everything on the lock screen. So we'll hook SB lock screen view controller, base, and inside of here, we're hooking the view will appear method. And that is actually important. We'll run the original code. Now we need to create views that will show the value of our settings. So we should create a UI view called status view. And we'll initialize it with a frame that's in the upper left-hand corner with a width and height of 250. We'll set the background color to black. And then we need to create a label as well. And we're going to use the same frame that we used on the status view just to save some time. All right. Now we need to, well, I guess first we should set the text color because you can't read black on black. Status label, set text color. Oops. UI color, white color. So now we need to set the text of the status label to the value of our setting inside of our preference bundle. So we need to retrieve this isEnabled switch value and we need to display it on the screen. Now obviously in a more real-world example, if this switch was disabled, you wouldn't show it to the user on the lock screen. You would disable your tweak entirely, and if it was enabled, you could enable your tweak, or whatever you wanted to do. So to do it, I'm actually going to steal some code from another project I have, because I can never seem to remember this line. But if I paste it in, we can take a look at it. Basically, we've created an NS dictionary called bundle defaults that stores all of our settings inside of this bundle identifier. Now, this bundle identifier is the wrong identifier because I copied and pasted it. So we're going to set it to the one that is defined in our defaults. And if I paste that, it will retrieve the proper settings now. So now that we have an NS dictionary that stores all of our settings, we need to retrieve the specific setting for the enabled switch. So to retrieve the value of the enabled switch, I just do ID is enabled is equal to bundle defaults value for key, and the key is enabled. And if you don't know why we used is enabled, it's because in the root.plist we have a key right here that's set to is enabled. So now is enabled holds the value of our enabled switch, and it's actually an NS number, which means if we want to do something like if is enabled is equal to 0, we can't do that. Instead, we have to treat this like an object. So we do is enabled is equal to 0. And if it is 0, that means the switch is off. So we can do status label dot text is equal to off. And if it's not 0, then we can set the text to on. Now obviously in a real world example, you wouldn't show the value of the switch, you would just disable your tweak if it was off and enable your tweak if it was on. But for this, we're going to be displaying on or off on the lock screen. So now we need to add the views to the screen because they're not actually on the screen yet. So I can do status view, add subview, status label, and then I can do self.view, add subview, status view. And that way we can add both the status view and the status label with just one statement. Now there's one more thing we need, and that's an interface for SB lock screen view controller base. And we make sure to tell Theos that it inherits from UI view controller. And the reason we need this is because self.view doesn't exist right now because SB lock screen view controller base doesn't know that it has a view object. So now that we've defined this interface and it inherits from UI view controller, we can use self.view. All right, that should be it. If I make package install, once the device resprings, we have an off label and a gigantic black rectangle. And if we go to our settings app, you can see that the setting is disabled. And if I were to enable it, lock the device, turn it back on, we can see that it says on, which is exactly what we expected. So now we know how to retrieve a value from the preference bundle, but remember, not all of these will be on or off values. If you use a different cell type, you can get different kinds of inputs from the preference bundle. So for example, if you were to use the PS slider cell, it would return a number between a range, not an on or off value. If you were to use a PS edit text view cell, it would return text, not a number, unless of course the text was a number. But just keep this in mind because you can get different inputs with different controls. Alright, so now that we know how to implement basic functionality, let's take a look at styling your preference bundle. So one preference bundle that I really admire is dark messages. If we open it up, we can see that the entire thing is themed. We have a little icon in the top, we have a Twitter icon in the top right, this dark messages text at the top looks very cool. All of the sliders are customized, and they even have some custom cells going on here. Now, I'm not going to go into that much depth, but I will show you how to change some of the colors and make things look nice. First, we need to create a custom class. So we right-click on our preference demo preferences and create a new file called pdpcustomcell.h, and we create another one with a .m. All right, now we need to define the class. So we write @interface pdpcustomcell inside of the .h with an @end as well. And we need to inherit from PS table cell. Now, PS table cell doesn't exist in this context, so we need to define that with interface PS table cell. And this actually inherits from a UI table view cell, so we're going to do that as well. Now, I believe that's everything you need inside of the .h. If we pop over to the .m, we need to include the pdpcustomcell.h, and then we need to write an implementation for the class. Now, we don't actually need any code inside of here. All of the styling will be done inside of pdp_root_list_controller.m. But before we do that, let's go to the root.plist, and we have to specify that we want to override the cell with a different cell class. So to do that, we just do a new key called cell class, and as a string, we pass the class name. All right, so now this cell, the one that says open on GitHub, knows that it should be using the PDP custom cell instead of the original cell. All right, great. A few more things we need to do. Inside of the make file, we need to include the PDP custom cell.m. And then we need to open the PDP root list controller.m. So there's a method here called specifiers, and after the if statement, but before the return statement, is where our styling will go. So we're going to do something that looks really weird if you've never written it before, but PDP custom cell, and then this crazy long method name, and then we need brackets with brackets inside of them. And here we're going to write PDP root list controller. I'm gonna break this up a little bit. Class. And then we can just do it as if we are theming anything else. We'll set the background color to black. And so what this is saying in English is the PDP custom cell, anytime it shows up inside of the PDP root list controller, which remember is this page right here. Sorry about the red link. Anytime it shows up inside of that class, set the background color to black. And you can use this as many times as you want on as many different classes as you want. So just make sure that you have the PDP root list controller class right here and the PDP custom cell right here. But with that, you can theme just about everything you could possibly want inside of your preference bundle. Just create a new class, do all the hard work, and then you can style it inside of your PDP root list controller. The last thing I want to add to this preference bundle is an icon, because it looks a little weird without an icon. So to make an icon, you should typically work in a 1024 by 1024 canvas and scale it down to whatever you need it to be. Whenever you're creating icons, you need 3 different icons. You need one at 1x, you need one at 2x, and you need one at 3x. And the 1x starts at 29 by 29, the 2x is 58 by 58, and the 3x is 87 by 87. So as long as you can provide those 3 icons, your preference bundle will look great on all devices. So I'm going to export this icon in those 3 sizes, and then we'll look at where they go. Alright, so I've exported the 3 icons here. Notice how the name is icon at 3x, icon at 2x, and just icon.png. This is important if you want to load an icon into the preference bundle, but if you have the names and the sizes correct, you can just drop them into your preference bundle resources folder. So if I select them all, drop them in, and then run a make package install, we can see that the icon is on the left of it. And if we tap the preference bundle, you can see the open on GitHub link is now blacked out. Unfortunately, that's all I've got for today. If you like this video, leave a like, subscribe if you want, and I'll catch you in the next one.